Morning, everybody. Thought we could have a little bit more story time from witches, goblins, and ogres, and fantasy. And this story, Hari, is called A Queen's Revenge. Have you read this one before? Okay. Snuggle up, Hari. Let's do this. Once there was a king who met a witch, and he married her without knowing she was a witch. On the day he brought her home, everyone gathered on the palace steps to greet her. "How beautiful the new queen is," they whispered. The queen curtsied and smiled graciously. She knew she was beautiful. It was only right that everyone should think so too. But as she swept into the palace on the arm of the king, she heard one of her own gentlemen-in-waiting whisper, "Look at the king's daughter. She's even more beautiful than the queen." Little did he know what he had done. The new queen took the princess by the hand and kissed her on the cheek. "You and I are going to be friends," she said with a pretty smile. But in her heart, she was already plotting revenge. She wanted no rivals. And that night, when everyone was asleep, she cast a spell. Early the next morning, the palace echoed with loud screams. "Ah!" The maidservants had gone to help the princess to dress and were running about weeping and wailing and wringing their hands. What is it? What is it?" cried the king, who had come running in with his crown all askew. The weeping maidservants pointed to the princess's room. What a dreadful sight met the king's eyes when he entered. Lying on the bed, with its head on the pillow, was an ugly, scaly monster. There was no sign of the princess herself. The poor king fell into a swoon. Oh! While the maidservants did their best to revive him, the monster crawled unnoticed from the bed and from the palace. It dragged itself to a distant rock, and there it stayed. The countryside was soon in terror, for hunger drove the monster to devour everything that crossed its path. When a wizard was consulted, he said, "Tell the king to give the monster the milk from 7 cows every day to appease its hunger, and tell the king his daughter will not be avenged until his son returns." The king's son was hundreds of miles away on an expedition, but news traveled. And when he heard what had happened, the prince swore to avenge his sister. "I will avenge you!" He and his men built a longboat with a special keel made from an ash tree, Dada's favorite wood, and set course for home. The queen's magic powers warned her that the prince was coming. She summoned her imps. You know what an imp is, Hari? It's a goblin. "Raise a storm," she ordered. "Sink the boat, and the prince must not set one foot on the land." The imps raised a storm which made the fish think there had been an underwater earthquake, but it made no difference to the longboat. Its ash heel protected it from magic, and it rode the rough sea as if it was on a calm pond. There's the boat with the ash heel. "I'm not beaten yet," cried the queen, and when the imps reported back to her, she cast a spell that made the monster go to the harbor entrance. "The very person he's come to avenge shall be the cause of his death," she laughed cruelly. And the longboat was pulling into the harbor when the monster lashed the sea with its tail and drove it back the way it had come. Each time the longboat drew closer to the harbor, the monster drove it back again and again and again. And the men in the longboat grew exhausted in their fight to reach the shore. And at last the prince ordered them back to sea. You can see there the longboat trying to fight the tide. The queen, who had been watching the struggle, laughed and went back to the palace, where she pretended to be full of concern for the missing princess. "Oh, what a comfort you are to my sorrow," sighed the king, who had been completely deceived. The queen wouldn't have smiled so pitifully if she had known. Instead of going right out to sea, the longboat had gone round into the next bay, and with no imps and no monster to hinder it, they landed easily. She didn't really think of that, did she? The prince drew his sword, determined to find the monster and kill it. "It tried to keep me from my sister," he said. "It shall die." But the moment the prince set foot on the land, the queen's power over the monster vanished. And when the prince found it, instead of putting up a fight, it lay quietly on the ground. The prince raised his sword and was about to plunge it into the monster when it spoke with its sister's voice. "Give me kisses 3. Though I am a poisonous worm, I will not harm thee." Look how sad the monster looks. "This is some trick," thought the prince, and would have struck the death blow there and then, but before he could strike, the monster spoke again. "Give me kisses 3. Though I am not a poisonous worm, I will not harm thee." The prince hesitated, then quickly kissed his cheek. The third time he kissed it, there was a soft "sss," and the monster turned into its sister. He had broken the spell, and what a joyful procession it was back to the palace. How gladly the king greeted his 2 children. "Now we're a family again," he said, turning to the queen. "Oh. My dear, what is wrong?" he asked, when he saw how pale she was. "Watch this, father," said the prince, and he touched the cowering queen with a magic ash twig, against which a witch has no power, and she shrank and shriveled until she became a fat, ugly toad. So then the king knew he had been deceived and banished her from the kingdom forever. There she is, turning into a big fat toad. Okay, thanks everybody. We'll see you tomorrow.